Apparently, Khamzat Chimaev had already made his presence felt in Swedish MMA long before he became known worldwide. A video recently surfaced of ex-UFC fighter Brian Stann talking about Khamzat back in 2017 at a UFC fan Q&A, but Khamzat's name escaped him at the time. A fan asked him out of all the up-and-coming fighters who didn't have a contract with the UFC, who he felt deserved to be in the UFC, and even though he didn't recall Khamzat's name at the time, it was evident it was Khamzat, since Alexander Gustafsson has praised him on multiple occasions. Check it out.
Out of all the up-and-coming fighters, that don't have a contract, who do you think really deserves to be in the UFC?
There's a welterweight in Sweden, at Sweden MMA All-Stars, that trains Alexander Gustafsson. I don't know his name. I just know him by reputation, and he's not in the UFC yet, but he has a whole lot of success over all the big names that train at MMA All-Stars in Stockholm. And when we get this kid signed, I think he's going to make some real waves.
Conor McGregor and Henry Cejudo once again got into an exchange on Twitter. It began once again with Conor hitting mitts and Henry critiquing his training. Henry jumped on Twitter and said, "Everything is done naked, no fakes, no feints, no level changes, but you think you're going to get a different result. You work too much on combinations where you should be working entries, setups, and setting traps. Just a tip from the GOAT, meh." Conor fired back, "The opening punches are the traps, feints, fakes. You ever hear or see that before? Your little feints won't draw me out, kid, but pump a few real shots, you might get a response. You were a little fat novice with about 2 KOs at Bantam. I have 20 across 3 divisions. Quiet, you bum." Henry fired back, "You literally don't have a leg to stand on. The last time you won a fight, Caitlyn Jenner could still pee standing up." It looks like Henry Cejudo and Sean O'Malley will not be cornering Petr Yan when he faces Aljamain Sterling this weekend at UFC 273. Yan was finally asked about whether Cejudo and O'Malley would really be in his corner on the MMA Hour, or whether it was a joke. Yan said that as long as they didn't offer him their terrible advice and handed him water and ice, he'd be fine with it. Well, Henry heard what Yan said and fired back on Twitter, "Sorry buddy, I ain't nobody's water boy. Between your knees and O'Malley's steroids, it's just too much illegal activity for me to be involved in. Hashtag bend the knee potato face," and tagged Yan. Ronda Rousey is known to have brought women's MMA to the UFC at a time when President Dana White was completely against the idea. She managed to convince Dana by displaying her ability to sell fights and finish her competition almost all within the first round, from 2011 to 2015. Ronda during this period was very vocal and arrogant according to most fans. After getting outclassed and suffering her first defeat to Holly Holm via KO at the end of 2015, Ronda disappeared in embarrassment and made a return 1 year later versus Amanda Nunes and suffered the same fate. Ronda left the MMA world again in silence, which left many fans with resentment toward her. She went on to join the WWE and moved on from MMA completely. While Julianna Pena, the now reigning champion of the women's bantamweight division, decided to give Ronda another opportunity at the title if she pleased. Julianna was on the MMA Hour and said, "She's kind of a joke in the MMA world now. What is the word? Sellout. Like pro wrestling? It's fake. You get paid millions of dollars. I get it. But for me, for the real shit, for the you're the real deal, I would say that that's in the UFC. Ronda is so old news." I think that what's incredible about her is that she opened up the door and was destroying people in 10 seconds and became a star because she was demolishing people in the first round. And that's great, but she got knocked out twice and never came back. So how legit is she? She had to go to pro wrestling, and I get that, and I think that that's great. But as a fighter and somebody who's competitive, I know that deep down it probably truly bothers her. The fact that she went away off of 2 knockout losses and never came back to make her name good. If she ever wants any of that real smoke, I'm ready. 24-year-old Irish prospect Ian Garry is set to fight Darian Weeks at UFC 273 this weekend. Garry received congratulatory messages from Conor McGregor after his debut and first-round KO victory over Jordan Williams at UFC 268. His post-fight speech talking about the Irish taking over MMA once again is what drew in Conor. Conor was an inspiration of his since he was a kid, and now Garry found himself inspiring his idol. He welcomed Conor to come train alongside him, but as we all know, Conor has always been loyal to his team in Ireland. Garry was asked whether he applied the same logic, but he said he needed to leave Ireland for a bigger gym in order to grow as a fighter. He's been training with Henry Hooft and others at Sanford MMA in Florida instead. Garry said, "There's obviously advantages to staying in Ireland. If I stayed in Ireland, I'd be the guy, but I don't want to be the guy. I want to be pushed. The guys I'm stepping onto the mats with here, there's not a single person in this gym that wins every round, that wins every minute sparring. It is tough. That's the thing I was happiest about when I came here. I'm gonna be in a gym with 40 me's, people who think the same way. I want to win every round. I want to win every second of every round. Every single day I wake up, but it's fucking hard, and that pushes you. People say to me like, oh, Conor would have been a much better fighter had he gone away. I'm like, he done good enough. He did good enough where he was. I'm not going to think about if he could have done better. He done what he did. And finally, Israel Adesanya jumped on his YouTube channel and shared his thoughts on who he'd be siding with when Khamzat Chimaev and Gilbert Burns fight each other this weekend. Israel said, definitely this is Chimaev's best opponent yet. A guy who has been tested in there. A guy who's a veteran, jiu-jitsu world champion, and former title challenger. I know Burns. He don't play about it. He's real. He's really about this life. I'm glad that he's up at welterweight now because he's a lot better at this weight class. But Khamzat is on a roll. His last opponent, Li Jingliang, was the most impressive opponent he's beat so far. Everybody else, meh. Gilbert Burns is good, but he gets hit. Everyone gets hit. And Khamzat's got power in his punches. You know what? I'll be rooting for Burns. I think he can get it done. As always, guys, if you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button for me. If you're new, subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date. Thanks for watching.